Welcome to Identity Unboxed, where we provide mentorship and promote representation for Black professionals in the advancement of the Black community.
We are seeking guidance from exceptional Black leaders, scholars, and professionals with expertise in their respective fields.
We hope to foster a space that promotes authenticity, inclusivity, and restoration for our listeners while exploring the intersection of our personal and professional lives.
This project is a culmination of our lived experiences as young Black professionals to transform our life trajectories, to overcome adversity and reach triumph.
Our intention is to inspire you on your path to discovering your purpose. Just to dive more into your journey of pursuing your passion of storytelling, you did share that your father has had a huge influence on your life, and I would just love to hear more about some of the advice that he'd kind of given you along the way, and just how he kind of continued to encourage you to go down this kind of new path that you were on, and kind of leave the stability too and be an uncertainty.
Yeah, I think with my dad, I think I'll say that I had pressures when I left my my job in the finance world, because a lot of people were like, very foolish, to leave this six-figure salary that could inch towards 7 if you do certain things, and particularly being a kid who was more working class, kid from Rainier Beach. But my father also took a lot of heat too, in the sense of like, what are you doing? Why are you encouraging him to go on this sort of reckless path towards journalism, and give up a life in finance, and you've helped him through college and everything else. This is a dumb, poor investment. He could have just went to community college, yada yada yada. And so my father had to take a lot of heat as well. But I think one of the things, while my dad isn't necessarily the most boisterous person, shall we say, he one of the things that he taught me via example growing up is that you have to be your own person, and you can't allow other people to form and dictate your life, when ultimately you're the one who has to live with the decisions that you make one way or the other. And so I think because of that, it meant so much to me for him to say, like, look, are you truly committed to this path, meaning going into journalism and founding the Emerald? And if you are, then I'm 100% for it, and I will do everything that I possibly can to make sure that it happens. And like I mentioned before, that he couldn't invest in it. He didn't have a ton of money. He's we're working class family. But what he could do in order for me to save money so that I could contribute it to what I saved to the Emerald, was to allow me to move back in with him as a grown adult, and take some of those slings and arrows from his friends about you got this grown man moving in here. What are you doing? And so with my father, I think him just being a model and an example of somebody who is willing to do everything that they possibly can, for their family. And I don't want to digress too much, but I'll say, like, particularly as it pertains, to Black fathers, so often, the story is even in the popular culture, right? The story is a stereotype of, abandonment and this and that. And, so for me to have somebody in my life, who's one of the best people I know as my dad, and, for him to be somebody who I think, is a modeler and an exemplar of, you might say, I guess, positive masculinity, in the sense that he's somebody who has also continued to grow in his understanding of life as it changes and grows and evolves. I'm just very grateful to have him in my life, from a young age to today, as somebody who continues to be, continues to help, mold me as a human being.
That's beautiful. Really. And I think it's just amazing that he really encouraged you to kind of just live in this kind of ambiguity, but there was going to be kind of a reward at the end of that if you kind of just stayed with the path, even though others may have disagreed with it. And really, it was, you know, your decision to choose this kind of new dream for yourself, but it was going to be something that you could be proud of at the end of the day, regardless of, you know, what others may have said or thought about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it's so admirable, you know, that your father allowed you and gave you, you know, that reassurance in yourself to follow your passions. Because, you know, despite, you know, you mentioned him facing pushback, like for him allowing you to go down that path. And I think so often just in today's culture, like parents view their children as like extensions of themselves rather than their own individuals, right? So instead of, you know, listening to what people were saying and persuading you to go down a certain path, he saw you not as just his son, but as an individual with talent and passion. And, you know, said, hey, do your best, give it your all. Like, do this as long as you give it your all, you know. And I think that's beautiful, that he gave you that, you know, encouragement, because a lot of times, you know, we look to our parents for that reassurance, like, can I do this? And, you know, a lot of times that parental, right, that parental, even as adults, that parental advice can make or break you, you know, if your parents are like, don't do this, you know, then you're like, maybe I shouldn't, right? So I love that your relationship with your father models that need for, you know, parents to, you know, even if they might not be comfortable taking risks like that, giving their child, you know, the freedom and, you know, encouraging them to take those risks. And so thank you for sharing that. Truly, I love that.
No, thank you. Yeah, well, thank you for asking the question about it. And also, I just really quickly, I'll say, and I don't want to overstate sort of the I guess the importance of role models in life, because I do know that they don't necessarily, you know, I know that there are obviously structural things and systemic things, you know, that need to be addressed in life as well. And I think oftentimes people, you know, sort of elevate the need of role models in order to sort of erase the need to address sort of systemic and structural things. But I will say that, you know, I just, as somebody who tutors, you know, younger folks, and I will state that, you know, it is important, particularly as it pertains, you know, to young, you know, Black males, that they do need, you know, I would say folks who can be good role models in life in terms of how to even, you know, in terms of just how to embrace life and be around life, as opposed to, you know, folks who are, you know, gravitating towards sort of the Kevin Samuels of the world and the Andrew Tates of the world, where it's this very negative, archaic, you know, anachronistic sort of form of how to perform sort of masculinity, when, you know, we're having a father and a mother and a grandmother who are all strong in their own right, who are all and model that, you know, patience and strength and empathy and compassion. Like, these are things that we are all, you know, male, female, non-binary, what have you, that are all, we all have access to. You know, I think, you know, again, having a father who is open to that, who has role modeled that for me, I can't tell you how truly nourishing that has been to my life, you know, as growing up and just being much more accepting of myself, accepting of my friends, accepting of my family, and not sort of following into sort of these, you know, traps, you know, that I see still, unfortunately, too many young people do, where they're trying to sort of perform some version of, you know, toxic masculinity that is very aggressive, is very, sort of, you know, it just free of all of nuance and understanding, and, you know, and so I would just say, in terms of like having a role model in my life, like my father, that has been so beneficial to me. And it's also taught me, even though I don't have, biological children of my own, it has been something that, with tutoring, with, mentorship, that I've tried to also, model, and knowing that, again, I'm not necessarily perfect, always trying to learn, but trying to sort of, if you will, be sort of a counter to some of the stuff that is unfortunately still very prominent in our society when it comes to what quote unquote a man is supposed to be and how he's supposed to act.
Absolutely. I love that you touched on that. I feel like masculinity in today's society is often rooted in ego, really,
Yeah,
and how, the portrayal that you have to portray yourself as a man, rather than just getting down to the core qualities of humanity.
yeah,
And like you said, that kind of like aggressive approach to masculinity or the combative approach to
yeah,
masculinity. I feel like it's led to a lot of globally, it's just led to a lot of chaos and destruction as we see power structures throughout the
yeah,
world, honestly. Like
Yeah.
keeping it real. And so I love that you bring that up, and the importance of men in general, black men especially, because I know, speaking for our culture, that emotional vulnerability, that, emotional intelligence, being soft, when necessary, is not
right,
necessarily embraced or celebrated, because we're taught it's a dog eat dog world. And, if
right,
or be eaten, right?
yeah,
Just based on our lived experience. And so I feel like that's kind of how we go on about life. And I feel like within the black community, that dog eat dog world mentality goes back to us not getting the recognition or the credit that we needed, despite being 10 times as good or working 10 times
right,
as hard. And you recently founded Hinton Publishing, and your inspiration came from carrying on the legacy of your grandfather, who had a passion for writing but was not given a fair opportunity to build his legacy. And so I was wondering if you could talk about that a little bit and provide us with some more insight into your grandfather's story, and how it inspired you to start your own publishing company.
yeah. Well, thank you for the question. My grandfather, his name was Lenny Hinton. He was a black writer in 1950 Chicago. He ended up working on this novel. It was about the Great Wall of China. It was a fictional novel about the Great Wall and the wars that took place over there, and the lovers that were separated from there, and the friendships and everything else. It was sort of this. He did a lot of research. He didn't never traveled over there, but it was with his sort of ingenuity that he was able to very much infuse this work of art with. And so he spent 5 years working on it. Ended up sending it to a publisher, um, and didn't hear anything back from that publisher in 2 years. And so one day, though, he's walking through his favorite bookstore in Chicago. He happens upon this display, um, and it has the title of what his manuscript was, right? And so he's, obviously it catches his eye. He sees that there's a white author's photo on the book and name, and it's like, huh. And then, he thumbs through the book, and it's, his work verbatim. And so, he had stolen his work and put a white author's name on it. Unfortunately, that's a story that, particularly at that time, that wasn't too uncommon. But unfortunately, in terms of how it impacted, him and my family and my mother, was that it unfortunately sent him on a downward spiral uh, with alcohol, and he ended up, pretty much drinking, the rest of his life and dying of cirrhosis of the liver. He never wrote again, and prior to him passing on, he and my grandmother decided to divorce, and my mom, when my mother was 5, and my mom only saw him, twice more in her life. And so, she ended up not necessarily having a huge connection, with her biological father. But, that story obviously was one that, was passed down and kept in my family. And so, knowing that I also had a penchant for writing, like, and storytelling, like my grandfather did, I was always very curious about him, as a kid and now, and wanting to not just know his story, but sort of reclaim his story and give an opportunity for folks who, in modern day, even though they may not, hopefully, do not have their work stolen, but certainly have their work unappreciated or ignored, or as we say in Hinton, the underinvited. They have not been invited to the table when it comes to the publishing industry. We want to be able to showcase their work, and we want to be able to do that in a way that puts, my grandfather's name on the book. We know that he, in his lifetime, didn't get a chance to see that happen. And so, in my lifetime, though, I want to be able to put his name on as many books as possible. So that's one of the reasons why we formed Hinton Publishing.
Thank you for that. Truly, it's just, gosh, that's so moving to hear. And it's frustrating at the same time, because I feel like it just speaks to such a large story of the Black experience, where your grandfather had a talent, had a passion for his work and delivered on that. And it was robbed from him. It was stolen, right? And, having so much, of rejection, and then seeing your work, plastered, I could only imagine the pain, and it sucks. And it's horrible that that's the experience for so many, Black people and Black families. And that's what happens, right? Is it leads us into despair, because it's like, how good do we have to be? How much work do we have to put in to be given the opportunity? And it's continually, closed door after closed door. Yet, you see people stealing our culture, stealing our ideas, and profiting off of it, and making it their own, as has happened so often in our culture and society. And I want to thank you for being vulnerable, because, and especially with telling your grandfather's story and how it impacted your family, because we see that so often, right? Like, I know I've experienced that in my family, where, you have so many talented, bright people that you see the shine in them, right? And you see that they could really do something with what they have, but the world is so cruel that, it beats them up inside, right? And then you kind of see that despair play out in different ways, whether that be self-harm, addiction. It's just tragic. And so I applaud you, really, for carrying on your grandpa's legacy, and, being that beacon of light for so many people, and, doing what he wasn't able to do, because that is what legacy is. Like, you are the living word. You are the living truth of what your grandfather would have wanted to be himself, but wasn't afforded the opportunity. And that's what's important, is seeing us turn the page, right? And, giving our, ancestors what they weren't able to, and carrying that torch. So
yeah, appreciate you saying that. Thank you.
Yeah, I also echo what Brad said about how amazing it is that you're paving opportunities for people like us to be able to get into the publishing world. And it is so unfortunate what happened to your grandfather. I mean, that's absolutely devastating. And I think it also touches on another idea of the commodification of our narratives by people that have the power to be able to, profit off of them. And that's, I mean, I really can't believe that I can't believe that it's happened. It's horrible to think that, he saw his life's work and, his voice and his narrative taken by someone that had, the positionality in society to be able to do so. So, while it's devastating that he had to endure that pain, it's beautiful that you were able to take that and turn it into a legacy that you're building to provide those opportunities for others.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I wanted to kind of pivot a little bit. I know you shared advice your father had given, but if there's any advice that you would have given your young self back when, you're going through college, you're thinking about going into finance, and not really following what you wanted to do, which was the storytelling, what would that advice be for you?
I would say to be more present in life, to be here now, to um, not be rushing through life. Like you'll catch up with life soon enough. And I think, there's a saying that youth is wasted on the young. I think the root of that is because so many times we're in a hurry to get older and grow up. And I would say to live every day fully as you possibly can, and to be attuned to it, to not be rushing through it at a different pace, but to try to keep on with life at its own pace. I that's we talked earlier about regret. I think the regret that I would say that I definitely have is like in high school and college, sort of being so scared. Not scared is the wrong answer, but a wrong word I should say. But being so dismissive of living life right now. Just enjoying it for what it is right now, fully absorbing it, and being sensitive to it, like in this very moment, and paying attention to it. Because I think as you rush through life, there are so many things that you don't quite pick up on, right? You don't notice as much as when you're sort of being still in life and trying to go at a more deliberate pace. And so I would say that I think that's what I would tell my younger self, is to try to go at a more intentional, deliberate pace, and realize that you're going to get to that destination as fast as you would have otherwise, right? It's sort of like when you're driving on the street like Rainier Avenue or something, and somebody zooms to get past you, and you end up at the stoplight with them, and you're doing 20 miles less an hour, and you end up at the same place ultimately, right? Even though that they were just rushing through. I think that's many times how we approach life, right? Where we're zooming through, even though we're going to reach that same destination at the same time as the other person who is taking a more deliberate pace. So that's what I would tell myself.
That is very powerful. Being in the here and now. Thank you for that advice. I feel like in the world of capitalism, it's all about claw your way to the top, grind, work harder, right? And we're all like in this cycle of like just, being alive but not living. Just to live doesn't mean you're alive.
Yeah.
And just slow down. Like, that's, I feel like that's so important. That's truly a gem. It's something that's sounds very simple, but really I feel like it's a key to life. Like, slow down. It's not a race. Yeah. You're going to be okay. Like, breathe, be here, be present. There is only here and now.
Yeah. Also, that analogy is amazing. The stoplight, people that are speeding to the stoplight and someone else is maybe going the speed limit, but it's also kind of a metaphor for how we all have a different personal journey, and that like success is not linear. I know you shared that with you building South Seattle Emerald, that it wasn't a linear journey, but all of our journeys look different. And sometimes people are slower getting to that end goal. But for others, maybe they sped their way there. They're 25, they're working the dream job, they have the big salary, and you might still be in kind of that building phase. And that's your journey. It's not their journey. You shouldn't compare it to them. We're all on our own, it's our own race, our own pace type of deal. So yeah, I think that's great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Marcus. And your work continues to center the community. What legacy do you hope to leave behind for young professionals that you've inspired along your journey?
Yeah, I think I don't know. I mean, I'll say like in leaving the Emerald a year and a half ago, in terms of leaving its day-to-day operations, I was thinking a lot about legacy and what does it mean. And, I think I rejected the notion of, certainly the great man, a great person theory of legacy, where it's this one person who does X, Y, and Z, and then they get praised. What I think, and I've learned about legacy, and I hope it starts to become more and more popularized, is, we live in a time where as I should say, as life progresses, right, people's names are going to be forgotten, what they sort of did will be forgotten. But which is why I think the import of legacy is more so of being able to say, I contributed to, more love in a community. I contributed to providing more compassion in a community, right? I was sort of a part of this droplet, in this ocean, or in this stream that, nourished something that nourished a garden, or nourished nourished life in some way. To be able to say that, in with what you've done with your life, I think that makes a life. I think, like, again, going back to the 9th anniversary of the Emerald, one of the things that I liked about it when I was there at the event was, bumping into or meeting people for the first time who didn't know me. I hadn't met them before, hadn't connected with them over the, with the Emerald. They had a different connection with the Emerald than me, and being able to talk to them and seeing how happy they were, or how it had impacted their life, and realizing that, there'll be one day that people don't even associate with me with the Emerald, because it'll, have outlived me. It's already outlived my direct involvement. And so just to be able to say that you contributed to something without needing to necessarily be given the credit for it, or be given the recognition for it, but that you helped, to collaborate with other people to make something that, was indelible to a community, that provided more love in the world and love in the community, that again gave more, opportunity to a community. But I think that's the legacy that I certainly want to continue to work for, and some of the other things that I do, and I hope other people sort of adopt that notion of legacy, as opposed to constantly trying to do something, manufacture sort of a version of themselves so that they'll be remembered, in some way, as opposed to remembered for contributing, to something that was much bigger than just, them as an individual. Like it means more to me when you say legacy. It means more to me that 50 years from now, the Emerald is around, regardless of whether I'm attached to it or not. Because I know that I'll know then that, it's been something that has endured with the collaborations and contributions of more than just one person.
Wow, thank you. It's beautiful, and I love that you had said, I think the phrase was nourishing life, or nourishing people with what you do. And it's great to hear that you've been able to see the cascading effects that you've had on the community, at your celebration for the Emerald, and people coming up to you that had never met you before, and they'd been reading this publication. It also impacted them and inspired them. And that was one of the publications that inspired us to kind of go down this journey. I remember Brad and I had a conversation, and we were thinking, wow, Marcus started up this publication, and, look what he was able to do with this. This was an idea that he had, and he just kind of went for it. And, why can't we do that, with the resources that we have? And so you've made an impact on us. We just wanted to express that gratitude that we have for you.
Well, that means a lot to hear you both say, and I'm grateful to the both of you as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Marcus. Surely, the work that you've done, like you said, you are leaving behind a legacy in the city of Seattle, and it's very admirable that you saw that need. You saw, oftentimes in journalism, you have white folk, coming from outside of Seattle, who aren't very involved in communities like Rainier Beach and other communities and neighborhoods in South Seattle that come and capture the story without actually knowing the history and the culture and just everything that the neighborhood has to offer, other than those experiences that they capture for the headline. And I feel like you are, like I said before, like just you are the living legacy, that your grandfather wanted to leave behind. Because look at you, like you said, even though you've stepped down from the day-to-day operations of the Emerald, that's going to live on. That's going to be something that goes on beyond, your time here, probably. That's going to be something that you pass down and that continues to, ascend and be a beacon for the community, especially as people continue to wake up to this journey, and the, real concept that we need, diversity in journalism and in all fields, really. We need our stories to be heard. And so thank you for, through pursuing your own passion, building and leaving behind a legacy for so many others that you don't know and that you may never meet, and it's important that you know that you are leaving a legacy behind for your community.
Yeah, well, as are you. So, you've taken that torch, both of you, and I seriously can't wait to see, what you continue to do with Identity Unboxed and what you do beyond it. And probably, I can envision 10 years from now, you all are being interviewed, in a very similar style by, a newish journalist or whatever, or podcaster or influencer, and you're saying the same thing. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate your support, and I appreciated all the advice that you've offered and your insight. And the last question we have always asked every single one of our guests is, what does Blackness mean to you, and how does it influence, your work and just how you navigate the world?
Yeah. I think, certainly for me, as it relates to kind of how I move through the world, I look at it, I don't want to say in counter to whiteness, but certainly because it is its own thing, and I don't want it to, I don't want it to come across as it's, that it can't exist individually. But I will say that, for me, where, whiteness is very much rugged individualism and sort of, commodification and atomization and competition. I look at Blackness as collaboration and, camaraderie and, a seeking of joy in life versus a seeking of extraction. And, it's a seeking of fulfillment. Where I think, whiteness is, attempting to be a measure of success. I think I look at Blackness as a measure of significance. How are we moving through life? Who have our lives touched? I also see, Blackness as evolution, the realization that we're not, static people, right? It's kind of like, sort of the metaphor of wine, right? If you open it up today and taste it, it'll taste different than any other day. I look at us in that way, in terms of Blackness, that, as wonderful as we all, the trio of us are, today, tomorrow will be, just slightly different, hopefully, right? We'll have known more than we did the previous day. We'll have had a different experience that maybe the process that has influenced us in some way. And so I think it's a constant level of, evolution and growth. And also, I think where, whiteness is frenzy, I look at Blackness as the ability to have, calm and stillness and, intentionality over time. And that we're not just here to, eat, produce, consume, and die, but we're here for so much more in terms of an exploration of, the heights of life and, the heights of relationship, that we're truly here and with purpose-driven lives as opposed to simply just to be consumers on this world, but to also be stewards of this world. So yeah, that's what Blackness is to me.
Wow. I don't have any follow-up to that because I believe you said it so well. And thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Marcus. And before we conclude here, is there anything else that you'd like to add? Just thank you for your vulnerability and for also being you and sharing your story. We'd love to hear anything else you have to say. If there's any last little gems you'd like to drop.
No, I just, again, appreciate you for, what you're doing with this podcast. I wish you nothing but joy with it and fulfillment with it. And it's just been an honor to be with you today.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we really appreciated this time with you. So thank you again, Marcus.
Yeah, anytime.
We are so grateful for your support, and thank you for listening to Identity Unboxed.
Authenticity is your guide to cast an impact on the world that you will be proud of. Signing off with pride, Tiana
and Brad.
Thank you so much.